Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of my podcast. For those of you that are listening, I'm super excited about this. For those of you that are watching, hello. I have the awesome Nigel Willson on, and Nigel is an AI expert and a genuine AI expert on this. Nigel currently has his own business, Awaken AI. I met Nigel when he was at Microsoft, and he presented at a session I was at, and he blew my mind. First time anybody's actually been able to explain quantum computing to me in simple terms that a mere mortal like I could understand, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But Nigel, who, what, why, when, where? A bit of background on you before we kick things off.
Yeah. I'm glad you set expectations with awesome and expert. I mean, how do I live up to that? But yeah, so I guess in terms of background, I've been in the industry, the technology industry, for a great number of years, kind of across lots of different sectors. I was at Microsoft for the last 20 years. And when we met, I was CTO for professional services in Europe. Kind of looking after the big four in professional services, and really I was kind of helping them with kind of innovation and near future technologies, and obviously artificial intelligence and some of the future technology like quantum computers were part of that. I left back end of last year, really because I wanted to do something different, under really good circumstances. I've continued to do bits and pieces with kind of Microsoft since, but I really wanted to kind of focus on kind of my own business and kind of having, I guess, a little bit more of an independent voice into some of these conversations, and also kind of be a little bit more kind of future looking. So absolutely things like quantum computing, DNA storage, some of the exciting technologies that are up and coming, but also kind of really leveling that out with kind of actually where we are, the reality of where we are at the moment, and the current state of artificial intelligence, and also some of the ethical and societal implications of that as well.
Cool. So, artificial intelligence. What is it? Is it Arnie and Skynet, and it's all game over, and the robots are going to take on? Maybe, I mean, the current climate, maybe they do a better job. Who knows? So, is it that, or is it not as kind of Hollywood makes us believe it is?
Yeah, I guess you can't have a conversation around artificial intelligence without bringing up the Terminator, can you?
No.
And I guess one of the kind of cautions would be be careful what you wish for if that's kind of the future that you kind of are thinking of. But I guess what's referred to a lot in the movies is something that's called artificial general intelligence, which is the point that technology and kind of algorithms can think in the same way that we do, or be intelligent, or actually be more intelligent than we are. And and the reality is that we are many years off of that, and I suspect way outside of kind of my lifetime. And also I think when we achieve artificial general intelligence, it will probably start to redefine actually what intelligence is. But the moment where we are is something that's called artificial narrow intelligence, so AI that is good at specific tasks. So, I guess an example of that would be, Amazon Alexa, where it's pretty good at recognizing our voice and kind of what we're asking for and coming back with a response. But, if you ask it to make a cup of tea, well, you could try asking it and you get an interesting response back. So AI at the moment is very, very narrow, very specific to the task that we ask it to do. But still very much also an emerging technology, even though the term's been around since the 50s, the technology is still very much emerging. And one of the challenges that we see, to be honest, in the industry, is that technology outpaces the governance and kind of legislation as well. So quite often we come up with these kind of great ideas of what we can use the technology for, but actually the governance and the legislation is slightly behind it. So no Terminator future for us, I don't think, but a useful tool definitely.
So in terms of things like, would then one describe Tesla, that's still at the artificial narrow intelligence field, even though what it's doing seems pretty impressive in around a quasi-autonomous car.
Yeah, so things like self-driving cars. I mean, again, when I was a lad, which was a little while ago now, it was the dream was of flying cars in the future, which we never quite got to achieve, although with drones maybe. So similarly with Tesla, Tesla's intent to have a self-driving car, I think we're still quite a way off from from achieving that. But the thing that's been interesting is on the journey to trying to achieve it is there are all these other technologies that have come about,
Yeah.
which are helping the current cars. So things like, when you start to move outside of the lane you're on, because it's looking at the white lines, and
Yeah.
and also kind of 360 cameras that are looking at who's in front of you, who's behind you, and kind of warning you if stuff's getting too close. So I think what we're starting to see is, although the actual end goal, some say may never actually be achieved. And again, there may be that the reason might not be technological, might actually be societal,
Yeah.
in terms of, do we want a machine to make decisions as to kind of whether we knock over a small child over here, or
Yeah.
elderly person in the road over here. But the technology on the road to that is definitely going to enhance our lives, and I think that's true of kind of AI across the board.
Cool. So bring this into kind of the business world then, where you mentioned that CTO professional services at Microsoft, so working with the big four around kind of future looking, etc., etc. What is it that you were seeing or advising on in kind of that space that you were helping them think differently, or how this technology could support whatever it was they were doing, either from the sales side, I guess, or for respective, I guess, client bases that were crossing over between Microsoft and themselves?
Yeah, so I think both from a sales point of view, and from a general business, if you think about the kind of services there are kind of legal, accountancy,
Yeah.
audit, all of those kind of businesses. They were all looking at broadly similar things, and prior to COVID, and I would say probably even more so now, customer expectations were going up. So what you were going to provide in the way of a service to a customer, their expectations were higher in terms of the quality that you were going to offer them, but their expectations about that the price was going to be cheaper, because of they hear about things like automation. So customer expectations rise, price goes down, and that means that you can't do the same thing as you were doing kind of last year or the year before, because you're not cost effective to the customer anymore. So they're all looking at the same thing. How do they increase the number of customers that they can handle at the same time as driving cost down and speed up? And automation is kind of part of that. So early days was kind of robotic process automation, where you just basically look at very manual, repetitive tasks, like entering stuff into a spreadsheet or looking up web pages on the internet, and automating those kind of processes. But that then kind of starts to move to, how do you apply real artificial intelligence to that? And so some of the things they would look at were automatic report writing. So, maybe we're having a conversation like this as kind of, as you as the customer, and afterwards I would want to do a report for you. So how do we transcribe the conversation that we're having automatically using artificial intelligence, language recognition, text to speech, speech to text? How do we do some kind of analysis of the conversation that we've had and cut out the kind of chit chat from it, put that into a report format, and not send that to the client? It was always a kind of case of, right, that's now ready for review. So there's always the human in the process. But if we could say 50% of the amount of time in a client interview, that means that we can have exponentially more kind of clients that we deal with. And so it was the early days of looking at, and I guess the findings basically were, the technology was starting to be in a good place to be able to kind of help with some of that, but not quite there yet in some of the areas. But that didn't mean that it got discounted, because the exponential rate of change in technology means that you don't have to wait years for it to be better. It could only be a few months. And also with companies like Microsoft and Amazon, they take customer feedback now kind of on a monthly basis. So some of these new features kind of getting added on a regular basis. And all of this automation helps with whatever process, whether that be a sales kind of cycle and kind of how your customer, or whether it's an accountancy company, or whether it's a legal company that are offering legal services. The more you can automate, then the more customers you can have, and the lower you can drive the price. And I guess that was the overall theme.
And it's interesting because robotic process automation, again, I think this is the challenge of maybe some of the vernacular, is like, we're not actually necessarily talking robots physically doing someone's job. No. It's a piece of code, ultimately, a computer program, which then just executes upon whatever you say. And I guess it's words like automation, driving the price down, then people start thinking, okay, well, we're basically on a arms race to the bottom, if you will. What does that mean for roles and people and the societal impacts? Not irrespective is the wrong word, because obviously we're going through the current crisis we're going through at the moment is, the humanitarian side of that is insane, but we are going to come out the other side of that. And I guess part of what all of this has done is the speed of digitization that this has increased. But we're not necessarily talking about replacing people. And I think you before we went live, you mentioned this is around using technology and software to augment roles. And I like the fact that you actually said that the report isn't then sent out automatically. It requires that human intervention to sense check things. So I guess this technology is not perfect, and things can go wrong, or it can misinterpret something, which could send you off down, in a completely different place.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a kind of massive kind of reputational risk, kind of more than anything else, if the technology goes wrong. And you just need to look at Cambridge Analytica and some of the other kind of examples, Clearview in the US, other examples of kind of where, heavily technology-based companies have done something that would be considered to be on the borders of kind of what's ethically right, and paid the penalty for kind of doing it. So it's definitely an important consideration. The whole kind of question of, is AI going to take my job, has been one that's been around for a long time. And I think 18 months back, the BBC did something on their website where you could kind of, describe the job you did, and it would kind of tell you whether you were going to be replaced by a robot or not. But you're absolutely right. The robots we're talking about are software robots, not actual physical Terminator type robots sat at keyboards. But to be honest, the jury's still out. And for every report that I see that somebody from credible sources, that somebody says, we are going to head into a kind of time when there's going to be mass unemployment, there is another report that says, actually, this is going to be a great opportunity and create more jobs than actually get replaced by automation. I think the reality is that jobs will change. I mean, we no longer live in a time when you go to university, you kind of like learn a trade or something come from university and you apply that for the rest of your life. None of us are in that situation anymore. We have to constantly learn and relearn our kind of trade as we go through. And I think providing that we are able to do that, then we'll keep on the right side of the kind of automation side of things. The one worry I kind of have, I guess, around automation is that we can say that the jobs that are replaced are low skilled jobs, so that enables the kind of people that were doing those jobs to take on higher skilled functions. But what we need to remember is there's certain parts of society that are always going to be sat in that kind of low skill side of things. So that will be the jobs that they feel kind of comfortable doing, and it will be hard to retrain them to do the jobs that are kind of, maybe kind of higher skill. So we need to make sure in this, I think is what I'm saying, that we bring everybody along on the journey. And this is not just a reskilling of the people within our organizations as their jobs are replaced with higher skilled ones, but also with maybe low skilled workers to be able to kind of bring them into kind of other jobs as we transform through the new job future.
Indeed, no, I'm on the positive side of things. If you look at the world of what social media has done in terms of it's created an entire market in terms of roles and marketing roles that have been born out of that, and how social media now impacts everything that we do. And there's the old adage that the Luddites going in to smash the printing presses because it was going to replace them, and so on. But we move and evolve with the times. And I think actually, what the current climate has shown is actually some people can be really, really innovative and pivot very, very quickly. I'm a big barbecue fan, and it's like all the kind of, dare I say it, the hipster burger joints around London have moved so quickly to actually delivering their DIY burger kits online.
Yeah.
Through they plug in payment system, plug into WhatsApp, plug into Instagram, get their menus done into the logistics system, which then works out all delivery times for them, how, what, why, where. And they're actually probably doing more revenue now than they were when they were relying on footfall of people going into their small burger joints or their things on the in the market. So it gives me great. I think there's going to be some huge positives which come out of where we're at. What's interesting for me is kind of this AI place in, Well, I guess the lack of kind of understanding of it, but in the sales and marketing world of actually how it can be helpful. But I do fear that, are we going too far down the automation route? And what I mean by that is sales engagement technology is kind of the new thing at the moment. We're probably 18 months, 2 years behind where the US is on this. So for those that aren't familiar with sales engagement technology, this is your Sales Loft or your Outreach are probably the two biggies. I think you could probably almost put Sales Navigator to a certain extent into that. It'd be Microsoft AI for Sales, which is the Microsoft product. I think Salesforce has got Einstein is their one.
Yeah.
And the idea being is that as a salesperson, you come in the morning and this system literally tells you, these are the people you're going to email, these are the people you're going to call, these are the people you're going to do social outreach to. Here's a template at X, Y, Z. Click a button and off you go. And I believe it was Outreach last week or week before just raised another $50 million, I think, in Series A or something, which now values them at $1.1 billion. And Justin Michael, who I'm getting on next week around this, he shared a post saying there's 6.3 million salespeople around the world, and he believes that up to 70-75% of a salesperson's role can be automated. Do I agree with that? I don't know. We're going to have a debate. But where my kind of question is, where is this going to take us? It's like, what is the point of a salesperson if they're literally just coming in and basically being an order taker? You're literally having a robot just telling you what to do. Not a robot, but a software program telling you what to do.
Yeah. So it's a great point. So just tracking back to one of the points before that. So one of the things with professional services, when you used to go to the conference, when we had conferences and we went to them, and I used to talk, it was interesting. So if you talk to the big four and you say, what are you worried about? They're worried about all of the smaller professional services companies. If you speak to the smaller professional services companies and ask them what they're worried about the big four. And they're all worried about each other taking each other's business. And the message always was to the smaller companies, don't worry, because actually you're in the better position. And for the reasons that you said, cloud technology, scaling up, scaling down, your burger example is a brilliant one, because the number of websites that are spun up over, the period of COVID to offer services is just absolutely a plethora of them now. But you can spin stuff up and down, you can scale out, and you can compete with big companies really easily. So I think that's incredibly important and kind of powerful. And I think to your other point around kind of how much can you replace of a salesperson's kind of function, I think back to the chatbot experience. So lots of these places now, you go onto a website and it says, do you want to chat? And it's quite obvious to start with. You're having hello, how are you? It's a chatbot, so it's a piece of software at the back end that you're having a conversation with. But the really good chat software now is intelligent enough to understand if you're getting frustrated with some of the answers that it's giving you, or some of the kind of nuances in your conversation, and reroute you to a person. And the person then takes over and says, I'm here to help and whatever. So I think of this, the sales process is, yes, I think of a lot of the sales process can be automated, but the bits that you automate are the bits that are the kind of routine bits. And you recognize the point that your customer might be getting to a point where actually they don't want you to be speaking to an automation, or they don't want an automated process. They want to be handed over to a human and to be handheld through a process. So I think the key thing is to understand where automation ends and where people start, and to have a graceful handover between the two. Because in the chatbot experience, if it's actually a whole bunch of questions about who you are and where you live and what services you're after and all the rest of it, you don't want to then speak to a person and have to answer all those questions there again. So it's the kind of whole know your customer piece. And so from a whether it's a CRM system or kind of whatever's at the back end, to be able to have some automation, but then pass the right information on to a real person, to be able to say, I'm just picking up the conversation and I understand this is what you're looking for, and I'm here to kind of help you through, is the right way of doing things. And so do I think that 75% of all salespeople could be replaced? Some might argue, some of your viewers might be kind of shouting yes at the screen right now.
Yes, please, God, replace
them. Yeah, please. And the answer to that is probably over time, yes. But those people will then go on to do, as I mentioned earlier on, the kind of higher function tasks, and give more value. And that's right, and that's the way that things should be. But we also always need to be conscious of, people work best when they're interacting with people, and technology is great to augment but not to replace. And then the minute that you start to replace, then you can get into some kind of some deep water, and you can get some issues. And you don't want to hand your business over to an algorithm, I think, with things as they are at the moment.
You don't want to hand your business over to an algorithm. There's a quote if ever I heard one. But the thing is, you are right, and I'm a tech geek, and I always try and play with the chatbots just to see what it's like. I've had some good experiences and crap experiences, but actually, it's the time when I'm happy to go through a pretty basic process where, and I trust technology, I trust systems. They've all got my data anyway, so it is what it is, right? Doing online payments and all this thing, but it's typically when something goes wrong. That's then when I want to talk to a human being straight away. And it's when you get kind of stuck in the press menu one, then press, whether it's on the phone or through the thing. It's like, no, I just want to talk to someone because I can't find the answer. And that's then, kind of almost that brand reputation piece starts to come in because of that overall experience. And I think it would also depends on your industry, depending on what you are selling. If you're, stack them high, low volume, like printer sales type sort of thing, like what I was doing on Amazon, I don't need a field sales rep to come around and tell me the value of printers because I kind of get it. Okay, if you're fully networked and so on and so forth. But then inversely, I remember being at one of the big four, again, when we could go to conferences, and they had one of their experts from the CX side of things, but they were from the consumer side of things. And again, talking around intent data, listening data, social listening, how you can build all this data, and the algorithms can then work out sentiment to a certain extent, but start to drive your marketing strategy accordingly. And of course, the gentleman stood up at the back and went, "Well, that's all well and great, but I run a multi-billion-dollar SaaS company. My clients don't buy that way because it's a 2-year sales cycle, not a 5-minute sales cycle."
Absolutely.
And of course, the chap couldn't really respond to it. However, I do believe that big B2B, so big four Microsofts of the world, can learn from what organizations are doing at that end of the scale in the consumer space to leverage this type of technology to augment and improve the overall customer experience. And I'll stop talking in a minute, but I don't know if you've realized Nike have now launched their own app. I think it's crazy that Nike now have gone direct to consumer, whereas their entire history has been you go to the shop, your Foot Locker or Sports Direct or wherever, and now actually you can download the Nike app and have a conversation with Nike directly, build out your profile and so on. Anyway, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. And the kind of Nike one's interesting because now with automation of processes and kind of making the shoes and things like that, you can custom. I know Reebok were doing it. You can custom design your shoe through an app, and then just have this, your colors and all the rest of it turn up at your doorstep. So there's a lot of upside to it. I agree with kind of a lot of what you've said. I think my point about the kind of algorithm and kind of where this fits, and there was a great example in the press last week. I won't mention names, but people can kind of find it. There was a company that decided they were going to replace their journalists with an algorithm. So they were going to use artificial intelligence to kind of write and propagate press stories. So they did one, and they did one on the band Little Mix. Yep. And because of the facial recognition software is still not as good as it needs to be, and certainly if you're from an ethnically diverse background, it's not good. It got 2 of the band members round the wrong way.
Right.
So that was bad enough in the first instance. So one is we have replaced all the people. We've replaced them with artificial intelligence and an algorithm. That's not a great move. The second one is that algorithm has made a mistake. The third one is it was creating news stories. So others in the press reported on the fact that its algorithm had picked up the fact that this was, 2 of the band members were incorrect and made that news story. So it then started reporting on those news stories. So it was propagating its own mistake through other news stories. And so at that point, they decided people needed to step in and start to stop some of this. But it was generating so many news stories that people couldn't stop. The human side of it couldn't stop the amount that it was creating. So when I say don't trust your business to an algorithm, that's a great example of if you always keep a human somewhere in the loop there, then you stop those kind of problems from happening. And I think, that's when we're looking at automation, and when we're looking at automation of processes and sales processes, that is immensely damaging from a reputational point
Yeah.
of view if you start to have those things happening. So, and it's easily avoidable, and it's what I call unintended consequences. Nobody started out with the
Yeah.
kind of point of, oh, this is going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. So tread carefully and safely each step. Keep people involved in the process, and then hopefully you'll have kind of happy outcomes at the end of it.
That's the way to say artificial intelligence isn't that intelligent, but this is the thing. At the end of the day, it requires a human programmer to program that, and there may well be, bias or the unintended consequences that come from it. It's like the whole thing in terms of if we get to fully autonomous cars, at some point a car's got to make a decision to kill someone.
Yeah.
Is it the granny? Is it the kids? Is it and then who is right to make that decision in terms of ultimately? Because as a human in the split second reaction, we're all different. We're going to do things in a different. But a system is just following a set of rules, right? It's just following a set of rules the programmer has written and executing upon it. I think there was another way back when I think it was Amazon had to turn off their AI recruiting tool. Yeah. They were all good intentions, trying to make it less biased towards pale male, stale white men. But what they hadn't thought about is the data they were training it on. And all the data was all the historical recruiting data, which was guess what? Exactly the people they were trying to stop it leaning towards. And then actually what happened, it became even more biased towards filtering out everybody else and keeping the white man in situ, because it was literally just following instructions. What I guess is that the other piece, I was talking about a gentleman on this the other day, is that your data set is as important, if not, I guess, more important than the actual program itself.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's what I call lazy AI. So it's kind of where the person that has kind of decided to do something hasn't even tried to think through the implications of kind of what they're doing. And you're absolutely right. And it's a hard conversation to have this, right? The whole one about kind of bias and ethics and racial diversity is a hard one to have. But when you get, like you say, white male of a certain age kind of decides he's going to write an algorithm, and he's going to write it for facial recognition. So he just goes onto Facebook and pulls all the pictures of his mates out, or Instagram or whatever. They are all of a type, because that's his circle of kind of influence. When actually what we need the diversity. So at the point that we don't develop algorithms, lazy AI like that, and we involve a diverse set of people from ethnicity, from gender, from all of those kind of things, you don't get those kind of mistakes. And surely it's worth it from a reputational point of view, not to make it. So, I'm kind of all for boring AI and all of those things, but let's not have lazy AI.
No, indeed. And so in terms of, let's kind of let's go kind of all futuristic now. So when I met you for the first time in person, we're following you on Twitter and LinkedIn, you had a brilliant 3 slides which explained quantum and what quantum can potentially bring in terms of quantum computing. And I'll try and explain it in terms of visual. So imagine that you are trying to complete a maze, and in order to complete that maze, you have to go through every iteration to then get to the right answer. For a computer program, in current computing terms, it has to do that one. It has to do each thing one at a time. So each maze option has to be done sequentially. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so on. Quantum, I remember when you showed this, whole audience went, oh my God, now I get it, that's the same. Quantum can do all the calculations simultaneously. So you can solve the maze almost instantly without having to go through those sequential pieces to go through that. And from that point onwards, it's just stuck in my head. And I use that to explain when people ask, how do what is quantum? I'm like, well, I'm no expert, but this guy, Nigel. So where are we on the quantum journey, and what are the implications of what this potentially could mean for business, society, life as we know it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's great. Yeah, you described that brilliantly. And that's Shaw's algorithm, by the way. It's a guy called Peter Shaw who wrote the algorithm that enables that kind of stuff to happen. So where are we on this? There's what we know and what we don't know. So we know that a certain nation has been looking into kind of quantum cryptography and satellite transmissions and been quite successful in doing it, full details of which we don't know. The stuff we do know is the likes of kind of Microsoft and Google and IBM
Mm-hmm.
have all been working on quantum technology now for some time. And it is groundbreaking. It is, in the same way as we kind of like moved from the abacus to the PC that we know and love now, we will move from the PC to quantum computer, and it will be a similar kind of shift, exponential
Mm-hmm.
shift in terms of the technology. The kind of things that it enables is it's not just enabling everything faster, so it's not going to make Excel or Word go any faster, but what it will be able to do is computationally kind of process faster, as you kind of alluded to. So the other example is center of a maze. Not everybody wants to get to the center of a maze, but actually one of the challenges that we've had over COVID is how we distribute stuff logistically.
Mm-hmm.
And logistical problems with classical computers are pretty challenging. If you give it 2 or 3 paths and kind of or routes to try and get to, it starts to struggle as you kind of build that out. With quantum computers, they're really good at logistical programs, and Shaw's algorithm is that example. But also they're really good at other things. So if we look at again, kind of I guess a COVID or kind of pandemic kind of comparison would be when we're looking at new drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the drugs that we needed to do, and you'll heard it on the news, we need to kind of test drugs on kind of people, and so 1,000 people come forward and we test it on those kind of people and we see what the effects are and then move on to the next set and all the rest of it. And we're constantly iterating the type of drugs and the kind of people and monitoring the outcome. With quantum computing, there's this ability to do something that is called, and we can do it classical to some degree, in silico. So it's in silicon. So basically you take the DNA of a person and you represent that kind of person in silicon, in a computer program. And then what you do is you test synthetic drugs against that synthetic person and you see what the outcome is. We can do that to a degree now, but it's really slow. In the quantum world, it means that we'll be able to process not every kind of gender type, diversity type, every kind of makeup of a human being on the planet, but we can take all of the back catalogue of every drug we've ever had and test it against every person to see what the potential outcome is before we start doing trials. That's in the quantum world. And we're starting to kind of get to that point now. Where we are really is we're looking for this point where a single quantum computer will be more powerful than any of the other computers on the planet combined, and that's called quantum supremacy. I think it was IBM last year, or maybe Google, I can't remember, kind of claimed that they'd reached that point. It was in a very, I talked about narrow AI, it was in a very narrow task that they achieved it. The rate of change is kind of dramatic, and kind of part of the kind of thing of where we are now is I hope that post-COVID that the investment into quantum continues, because there is going to be maybe a reluctance to put investment into new technology in quite the same way it was before. But the rate of progress is exponential. So each year we get a bit closer and a bit closer. Microsoft solution's still a little way off. It's a different type of quantum computing to IBM and Google. Google and IBM still making good progress every year. When are we going to have it? It's always the question. When are we going to have a quantum computer then? Likely to be a cloud-based service, and I can easily foresee within the next 4 or 5 years that we'll have something that will be starting to solve some of what we call these intractable problems around climate change, fertilizer production, new drugs, but also speed up some of these other algorithms, things like speech recognition, image recognition. So it will definitely kind of help us for those areas as well. So getting there, but always a bit of a waiting game. I think it's exciting technology, but still a little bit of a way off yet.
But realistically, within our lifetime, quantum, you think realistic, and quantum at a level that actually it's in like my Surface Pro here, or it's still you need to plug into the cloud in order to run it, I'm guessing. So quantum being
I'm never going to say never in terms of it being in a laptop. But,
fine, I won't hold.
But I mean, given that it's the environment that it needs to run in is kind of colder than the coldest part of space at the moment. It is like minus ridiculous numbers.
Right.
Kind of like never say never, but you never know. But there are quantum algorithms now being written already, and there are quantum simulators from all of the big technology providers. So actually, we can run quantum calculations now.
Okay, cool.
But they are simulations rather than kind of on
Real.
on the real thing. So within our lifetime, I'm very hopeful, because maybe it'll give me another 5 years on my lifespan. I need that right now.
Awesome. So, I mean, I see if we could go on talking about this for forever, but in terms of, you know, if any leader is listening to this, you know, marketing leader, sales leader, CEO, chief exec, and they're not really considering AI at the moment, what would be your kind of top 3 things, or whatever your tips would be, the kind of the things they need to think about before kind of letting go on this, or investing in it, etc., etc.
Yeah, so I think if you're not thinking about AI at the moment, take a real strong, hard look at yourself, and consider whether you've got a future in business or not.
Right.
Because I think everybody else is looking at it, and you're going to find yourself kind of overtaken very quickly. So I think that's the kind of first thing.
Yeah.
In terms of kind of where to go with it, there are 3 things that kind of make good AI, and that's data, kind of cloud services, and good algorithms. So the start of that is data. So we're all, as we know, kind of creating massive amount of data every day, but that doesn't mean to say it's good data. So organizations are sat on top of the data sources they've been generating over a period of time, often in kind of like disparate kind of pools. So I think the first thing is, look at the data that you're creating already, and try and look to do some kind of consolidation of it. To your point about kind of predictive analytics, in effect, we know where we are with kind of COVID is kind of blown all of those predictive algorithms out the way.
Yeah.
Look at the type of data that was going to be important to you in the near future,
Mm-hmm.
and if you're not creating it, look to see how you can create it, and create it in a clean way that you can get value from it kind of quickly. So I think that's the first thing. Look at cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Again, lots of people on the cloud journey. Why is it so important during the kind of COVID? Because those organizations that were using cloud could scale out massively and very quickly, almost to a point that it broke some of the cloud service providers, because they were asking for so much scale.
Mm-hmm.
But the other really important thing, which I think wasn't considered before, is you can actually turn it off as well. So
Right.
if you're furloughing your staff, and actually you need to kind of go into a bit of hibernation for a time, just turn it all off and the costs go away. That never goes away if you've got a sunk investment in traditional kind of IT.
That's true.
And the third thing was around algorithms. And I said, there's lazy AI and there's lazy algorithms. If your data set is, not a good data set, then you're not going to have a good outcome. It's the whole kind of rubbish in, rubbish out, kind of thing of the past. So look at kind of algorithmically how you're going to get value from your data. Look at the ethical nature of what you're going to do as well. So AI ethics is a big kind of growing area, and that is when I start to run algorithms and produce outputs, is that a fair and inclusive one from a diverse data set at the back end? So kind of look at that as well. But I think, I would say overall, be excited that, post-COVID, there is going to be an explosion in technology. There already has been during, and I think it's going to be even bigger afterwards. And I hope that that's enough of an explosion to kind of take the kind of jobs market with it. And the some of the redundancies and layoffs that we've seen, that have kind of happened, will be soaked up by the explosion in technology that we see in the future.
An awesome positive notes to end on. Thank you.
I tried.
Nigel, as always, I could talk to you for forever. I always enjoy listening to you and your insight.
Thanks,
everybody else listening and watching, I hope you found that useful. I hope that's answered some questions. Maybe post some more questions for you. Nigel, if people want to find you, where's the best place for them to find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Nigel Willson, so that's Nigel without the L, Nigel Willson, double L and Wilson. You can find me on LinkedIn and also through our website, which is awakenai.org.
Perfect. I'll put all those links to the video somewhere here and on the podcast for those that are listening. But Nigel, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. And to everybody else listening and watching, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all next week.